Hey, welcome to this video about PowerPivot. Now, it's not about actually doing anything. This video is about explaining what PowerPivot does. It's going to be a bit difficult, but let's get to it. Now, last time we talked about pivot tables. We talked about tables and we saw what they did. So let's go to Excel, talk just a big refresher about it in 10 seconds and get to PowerPivot real quick. So here in my table, some of you might remember this table, and I've got data in it, and I've got some data about different people, and some of them which are genders. Oops, sorry. Some of them which about their genders, about their age, about their ethnicity, and about their relationship status, and about which hobbies they like, about their grades and their salary. So it's a lot of interesting information. But I have it, and I'm curious to do some stuff about it. Before we talked about interesting things, by the way, all this is fake data. You know, I might make some interesting conclusions because this is actually some real things. I want to work with tangible stuff so that people can get it, but at the same time, sometimes like it gives some conclusions and people might wonder what they are. So remember that all conclusions in this class are all, like untrue, and they're just made with fake data. But if you have real data, then you can figure out, some real information. So here we are in the example. So the first time I was doing tables, I showed you how to get when you had men, which are white, and video games, to figure out the number of how many there are. So the men, which are white, and like video games, how many there are. But you came to this new interesting theory, and my girlfriend, she loves signs, signs, and she decided that if the sign was right, then then there would be a difference. And I was like, I don't know. And then I came with the theory that the Chinese signs were the one that were right, right? So we were like thinking this funny story to see if signs had any data strength to them. But we've got the data here, and we've got the birth dates, and I've got the ages, and I've got all of this. But the problem is I don't have the information on the signs. But I found a tool online that would have given me the information of both signs in a nice table. So it would give me a table which I had the birth date, right? I would just have to give the birth dates, and it would automatically generate the signs, right? So I'd get the moon signs, or how they call it, I don't know, and the Chinese ones. Sorry, I'm not very good with signs. I'm just trying to make a point here. So birth dates would be inputted here, and then automatically the signs would be put online. Maybe you're even good enough in Excel to create the formulas yourself, right? But this is my game plan. So then I would have a table here with the information about, for each birth date, what sign it is, right? So I would have everybody's birth dates in, and I could get a secondary table here with all the birth date information. Right now, I could also input it here as an extra table, but there's a lot of duplicates maybe in these dates, and I don't need to have all those duplicates as extra information, and I'd like to save the columns of information, so I'm going to build it here inside of this, and I could use Vlookup to then access the information if I need it in Excel. That's how you would do it in Excel. So let's try to image this a bit here before what we did, because there is a lot of imagery. There's a lot of imagery to this. Before, what we did is we had a vertical table, right? In our table there was columns, and these columns, right, very useful columns, let us do stuff to them, right? We could analyze them, count them, and ultimately, when we're working with pivot tables, right, we're working with columns, and we're taking them together and putting them together to produce layouts, right? So columns was really the way of working. We had all these columns, and all the data was vertically put. It gave us some structure. But what happened was sometimes you had some information that had sub-information, or sometimes you had situations that weren't tracked the same way and that couldn't be input in that same table. And so then what you had to do is you had to create a second table of information right here with some data in it. And why did you have to build this extra table? So I can give you a lot of examples of why you have to build secondary tables, but I've got an interesting one. Say you're trying to track money about your trip, right? And you're not traveling alone, you're traveling with 50 people, right? Because for it to be a good exercise for Excel, you have to have a mass of people. But say you're traveling with 50 people and you're trying to track the expenses of everything, right? So you've got the flights, and not everybody has the same flight. So you're going to get a table about when the people are going to fly places. But also you're going to have hotel rooms. And since people aren't arriving at the same time and aren't sleeping at the same place, they're going to have different hotel rooms. Now, naturally, you could input here a table and put each line with a subline. But if you do that, you won't be able to use it for analysis because your table will have subtotals in it. And you can't have a table with subtotals in it to then be analyzed. So it would be better if you had it in two tables. One, which would be everybody's which flights they're on. So if somebody's on a flight to go and a flight back, you just have one list for each. And on your other one, you've got all your hotel bookings. So he's booked at this hotel from this night to this night. And now that you've got both tables, then your analysis is much better. The problem is, let's say your data was like this. You had one table like this and one table like this, like we saw in the example. What can you do now? Can you actually connect them right easily in Excel? No. In Excel, to produce this, you had to use Vlookup, right? Vlookup was our relationship creator. It was what let us create these relationships in between a table, and in this case, we're going to call it the fact table, with a dimension table, right? Because the facts really are all the people here, and the dimensions are the dimension of the signs, right? So this would be my fact table about, in one case for this example in Excel, right, the birth dates and all the people in it, the main table, and I would get a dimension table which would contain all of my information. And what's interesting is not when you only add one dimension, but when you add multiple dimensions, right? And what happens when you get multiple dimensions? And what can you do with it? Well, here, let's say that I'm talking about this example of our same file. I've got my table with all the people in it, so I know their birth date, their gender, and etc., etc. And here I know their signs, right? Because based on the birth date and the birth date, I'll be able to figure out their signs, right? So I'll have Chinese sign and moon sign. And then what I'll be able to do is in my report, I'll be able to figure out by sign data. We'll be able to add an extra filter to all of our information by sign because we added this as a dimension. Before, we did that with Vlookup. But now, as I repeat myself another time, we do this with PowerPivot, a very different tool, but that gives us a lot of power, right? It lets us connect tables together so that we don't have to use Vlookup anymore, and we can move to a new way of working. Does it replace Vlookup fully? No, you still need Vlookup for a lot of stuff. You can't live without it. Vlookup is extremely useful, but it does remove a lot of Vlookup's uses. Now, if you use PowerPivot, which is inbuilt in any Pro version of Excel 2016, you'll be able to produce relationships with your data tables without actually requiring to build the relationships with tools like Vlookup or queries or whatever techniques that might exist. It's going to be a very simple way of doing it. And this is added to Excel, and we're blessed. We're really blessed that it's added to Excel because it makes a lot of our lives easier now for us to look at multi-table data sets. We don't have to ask our IT people to build tables with their queries and to build everything. We can just go ask for a bunch of tables and put them together in Excel, combine them, and produce our data model, and then analyze it, without ever actually writing a VLOOKUP or a function. Much easier, much quicker, much more efficient, and you know what? It's a much better job. So really, well done Microsoft for implementing this. Well done everybody for working on PowerPivot. It really does a wonderful job. Now, by the way, is it easy to use? Yeah, but we're gonna have to go through how to connect data and then how to create relationships, because you see this is our data. We're gonna show how to connect the relationships, right? Then I'm gonna show you how to build calculated columns like we do in Excel, so that if I want to add an extra column right over here, right, with information, or if I want to add an extra column over here with the signs, right, this information that comes from this info here, right, like we would do in Excel. What if I want to do that, right? So this is how you would do it with DAX calculated formulas. And then a DAX measure, right? So what is that? That's the way that pivot tables calculates when we do values, right? How to create your own measures, how to use the implicit measures, and I'm going to show you just a little bit about explicit measures, right? And finally, the report tools, right? And the report tools, the report and the tools is not going to be the most lengthiest part, because that's not the most difficult and interesting part about PowerPivot. The most interesting part of PowerPivot is your ability to produce a multi-table pivot table. A multi-table pivot table that works really nicely. I hope you like this little part. I'm going to let you go. I've got a lot of explaining to do. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.